afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, Miss Paloma, I saw her, okay. Paloma Mohammed Martin, Acting Chancellor of the Judiciary, Miss Roxanne George, Founder and CEO of Brand Youth Global, Mr. Selwyn Collins, our virtual audience, and those in the room, good afternoon. My name is Lourdette Ferguson. I am a Brand Youth contributor and the founder and CEO of Sankofa Center for Leadership and Social Responsibility. It is an honor to serve as your chairperson for this afternoon. We're gathered here for the Women's Forum Series 2026, not sponsored, but under the auspices of Brand Youth Global and in partnership with the Institute for Gender Studies here at the University of Guyana, Turkine campus, and we are in the Education Lecture Theater. We welcome you. We welcome our audience online, and today it's an honor to continue the journey that we began in 2022 with Brand Youth Global, a journey that challenged us to look honestly at the forces that has shaped us as women, as leaders, and as nation builders. 4 years ago, we asked for 3 foundational questions. What have we inherited? What has shaped our thinking? And what must we begin to challenge? Those questions opened a necessary conversation about lineage, about leadership, and the systems that influence how women show up in the world. But inheritance alone is not enough. So today, we move from reflection to discernment, and from discernment to decision. And the theme for that conversation, the overarching theme of that conversation is from tradition to transformation, moving beyond barriers, shaping the future of women. And we ask 3 new questions that push us towards action, agency, and influence. And those questions, ladies and gentlemen, are: what do we keep? What must we break? And who or what do we become? And those questions are not theoretical questions. They are deeply practical, especially in a moment when women are redefining leadership at local, national, and global levels. Whether in boardrooms, classrooms, parliaments, creative industries, or in community spaces, women, as we all know, are shifting from presence to power, from being seen to being heard, and implementing changes across the board. From being included, just included to ticking of the boxes, to being influential. And so this forum brings together an exceptional group of thinkers, and you will hear from them as the evening progresses. We have 2 exciting panels this afternoon. The title of the first one is From Presence to Power: How Women Move from Invisibility to Influence at Local, National, and Global Levels. And the second panel is From Tradition to Transformation: How Women Entrepreneurs Are Transforming Economies and Navigating Male-Dominated Fields. And you will be hearing from the panelists and the moderators as we move along. Together, these conversations invite us to examine the systems we have inherited, the barriers we must dismantle, and the future we are called to shape together. So as chairperson, it is my hope today that the conversations are a little more than a forum, but they become a catalyst for us to sharpen our ideas, our courage, and that women across Guyana and you in the diaspora will step more intentionally into your influence. So thank you all for being here this afternoon and for joining this important national and global conversation. And this important national and global conversation. It is my pleasure at this time to introduce a few preliminary speakers before we get into the panel. And now, it is my distinct pleasure to invite our host, because we are still in her territory, to invite Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin to come and give us some opening remarks at this time. Let's give her a hand as she comes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, who I've known for a really long time. I wouldn't say how long, because it'll age us both, and she's looking so great. Honorable Chancellor, I will not say the AG at all, for good reason. I'll get into trouble, but I'm still not saying it. All IDB representative in Guyana, Lorenza, our dear friend, all members of the audience, all of whom are excellent, wonderful women of their own repute and very, very, very excellent persons in our society. I see many men here, well, a few men, and I'd like to say thank you for being brave enough, respectful enough to come out this afternoon, whether or not you were forced to by the woman sitting next to you or anybody else. This is a very wonderful thing to see men in the room. I'd like to also, of course, note and thank maybe Selwyn Collins, who is the chief forcerer and enforcer of us all, because I'm sure for women on Sunday afternoon at this time, we all have things that we would need to be doing for the week. But to see you all here this afternoon is absolutely a pleasure. I'd like to thank, of course, Dr. Edwards, Lisa, where is she? Somewhere around, and her team for working so hard, because this week has been a very, very active week for them. They have had 2 or 3 forums this week with young people from high schools on gender violence, supported by UNICEF and others. And so they have had an interesting week, but they are not giving up. So 2 things. One, I'm supposed to welcome you to the National University. It's not my territory, it's yours. It's State University, and we're always delighted to have you here. And second, I'd like to make a few remarks. First, I would like to posit a difference in view to the idea that women are doing so well these days. And Lord, don't start arguing with me, but we can talk about that. And here's the reason why. I'm going to tell you why. Because if you look across the academy, if you look across the world, if you look across industry, if you look across politics worldwide, you will note the following. A closure or defunding of programs that have to do with gender and women. You will see that women, in order for them to get positions, are subjected to some of the most horrible pillorying of their character, personal life, and otherwise, and oftentimes they are not able to hold those positions for any length of time. There's some prominent administrations at the political level, not our own country I'm talking about necessarily, that I can name, but I won't. This is not one country, this is globally. We are seeing a generation of women being destroyed by genocide, by homicide in our own country. We're seeing young girls and others under such tremendous pressure because of the economic conditions that we find ourselves in. So I will not stand up here today and say that the position of women, even though we did make many gains in the past few decades, is in any way safe or secure. This is not borne out by the facts, not at all. And luckily, I didn't realize I was supposed to be making remarks. Otherwise, I'd have said a lot more, but that's all I could think about for now. But the second thing is, though, I want to come at this from a very personal perspective, though, because as I wrap up my tenure as Vice Chancellor, my second tenure as Vice Chancellor, I am forced to reflect upon a question that I had initially been asked when I became Vice Chancellor in 2020. And that is, a lot of people from our country and around the world, media, etc., were asking me about how it felt to be the first woman Vice Chancellor in this country and in the Anglophone Caribbean. And it was a question that irritated me tremendously because, very stupidly, and I admit to being ignorant and stupid at that moment, I thought, why are they asking me about being a woman and about what it means to women and girls? I'm a Vice Chancellor for men, women, and everybody else, however they want to characterize themselves. But as I have walked this path through this time, and I have begun to answer those questions again from a different, more reflective, and much more informed place, I recognize the importance of this question and the importance of people like me and every single one of you, every single one of the women in this room is a leader in their own right. And I'm sure you'll have your own stories to tell about what it means to be a woman in that space at this time. So for me, at this moment, I would like to say that gender roles and women in positions of authority do have a specific and certain burden of responsibility that others do not have. And it is because every other woman who is thinking of what it's like to do this and who is afraid and who is thinking that maybe I could do this but maybe I can't is looking at you and hoping that you don't fail so that they can step up. And this has been my journey. This has been what has kept me going for the longest while, because I would not allow another woman who would ever be a Vice Chancellor in this or any university to say that this one failed. And failed because of anything to do with feminine stuff. So whether or not I had a bellyache, one of my children had an issue, whether or not it was something to do with a domestic thing, and we do have to carry these roles still, it was not going to come into the public space as something that would make me not do my job and not do it better. And I know that this is the same for every single one of you. So Selwyn, while it took a man with very sensitive gender-specific focus, and I'm not saying that anything is wrong with his gender, please, just so that people out there, right? He's male, right? But really, Selwyn, thank you so much for bringing all of us together and for allowing the university to be here. I'm writing about this, I'm reflecting upon this, and I want to invite all of you, outside of talking about this, please write, document your perception, your experiences, and your teachings and learnings about being a woman who leads. This is important. And I think this is the least I can do from this podium today and at any other time in the future, and the least you can do. The little girl is watching, and the little girl inside of you is waiting to exhale. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam VC, for inspiring us and reminding us of our responsibility to the 10-year-old girl. Now it's time for us to hear from a special person who is the founder and CEO of Brand Youth Global, the organization that has brought us together here this afternoon. Selwyn Collins, through initiatives such as Conversations with Selwyn, the 2019 40 Under 40 Entrepreneurial Awards, the 2025 Next Gen 12 Entrepreneurial Awards, and the 2022 Intergenerational and International Women's Forum Series, has always created spaces for dialogue, as Professor mentioned. Selwyn is a published author of several books and a recipient of multiple awards for entrepreneurship and community development. And we are honored to have him bring us together this afternoon in this Women's Forum series as part of his commitment to building ecosystems where talent, including women across Guyana and the diaspora, can lead. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Selwyn Collins.
Thank you, Luda. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for coming. And to the panelists, thank you especially for responding so quickly. This could not have happened without your response and cooperation. I look at the sea of faces and I see our nation's greatest resource, and that is its people. And I must echo Professor Mohammed's, the little girl is waiting and listening. And that helps me to introduce 2022, what happened, how this all got started. As you've heard, I am the founder of Brand Youth Global, and Brand Youth has quite a community of women. And at the time, they were young girls. The first introduction to them was way before the 40 Under 40 Entrepreneurial Award in 2019. In 2014, I think Yafet mentioned, I was hearing a lot of disparaging remarks about young people in Guyana, how they're lazy and they're just looking for handouts, and it troubled me because that was not my experience. And I created a Sunday afternoon special just to bring them on to share their stories. And it helped for the time, and it helped to shift the needle. But back to that little girl that is listening and waiting. In 2022, I was having a conversation with Dr. Thorpe, Christine Thorpe. And I don't remember how this really came about, but I remember asking her if there's a way we could create a forum series for women. And because I have a large network of women across the continent, Africa and so on. And I said it would be a good thing if we could introduce or bridge a gap, build a bridge between the generations and somehow help to connect those women with the young women of Brand Youth. That was my intention. And Dr. Thorpe said, of course. And then she said, I asked her to help to shape and arrange this. And she stepped in there. And she created the questions, the topics, and then we had help from others. But the challenge wasn't getting people to respond. The challenge was convincing myself that I could make this happen. But then as people start responding and the enthusiasm grew, the anxiety dissipated. And then something amazing happened. It became 7 consecutive weeks of conversations, intergenerational and international women convening on Saturday mornings. And yes, of course, I heard, how did you put this together? Some of my friends say, why would you do something like this, Selwyn? But I would tell people that I get these assignments, and when I get them, I just obey. I have no idea how it's going to work, and those of you who know me, coming to Guyana here often and doing events, no money, don't know how it's going to work, but it always works. And so I have muscles. And then between Dr. Thorpe and I and other friends, we pulled together people from as far as Botswana and Zimbabwe and Nigeria and South Africa, throughout the Caribbean, Guyana, North America, Canada, and the United States. I want to bring a point together. I want to focus on Professor Mohammed. When I called her, At our last award last year, she told the public, you can't tell Selwyn no. But you can't refuse Selwyn. And it's not that I wrangle anybody's arms or anything, I just ask. But I remember asking her if she could be the patron, because the format was to have 5 panelists, a moderator, and a patron who would introduce the panel. And that happened for 7 consecutive weeks. And it began in Guyana with Professor Mohammed, Michelle Ali is the moderator, and 5 amazing Guyanese women. And that was the genesis. That was the beginning of the forum series. That was 2022 during COVID, so it was all Zoom. And I have to say, I wanted to do it again, but life gets in the way. And when I came to Guyana for my high school students' conference last year and decided to stay on for a little bit, I said, well, I should do it. But I want to do it with a difference. And instead of 7 weeks, and I must say it's Yafet who sort of suggested, don't do 7 weeks, do 4. And thank you, Yafet. But I wanted to start with a live launch. And I reached out to Professor Mohammed, and she said, sure. But she did something that was very amazing, and she mentioned Dr. Lisa Edwards, who I met for not the first time, but officially. And Dr. Edwards taught me something, and I have to share this with you. You may take away something from this. So I put together a team from Brand Youth, Lourdette and Kanita and Dr. Perun in the States, and my idea was that women will own the space. My thought pattern is that as a man, even though I'm the sponsor and the architect, women should own the space. And I thought I was doing the great thing, and I'm having this conversation with Dr. Edwards, and she said, And then when you grew up as the last child with 6 sisters, you learned those nuances and those tones. And I said, okay, what's going on? And she said, well, I listen to languages. No, tell me. She says, well, it sounds as though the man gets the thing, and then the women follow. I said, oh my God, no, that was not my intention. And she said, I know, very graciously, I know. She said, but let us try this. What if you work alongside the women, and then the other men, especially in Guyana, get to see a man doing something like this? And immediately, I started laughing. I couldn't control myself. I said, done. Done. But what that said to me is how important it is to not just have conversations, but to listen. And that is something we need to do with each other. We tend to talk at each other a lot in this country. It is one of the reasons why I'm having this forum, because I think we need to have more conversations. I invited some men. I don't see a lot of them showed up, but we will change that over time. We need to have conversations, and we need to learn how to listen. And Dr. Edwards, thank you. Thank you very much for your grace and your kindness. We worked together. I kept telling her, we got this. This is not Brand Youth's first rodeo. We got it. We will do it together. The power of collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Selwyn Collins. The power of collaboration, indeed. All right, so it's the moment we've been waiting for to hear from these remarkable women. And it's my pleasure at this time to introduce the panelists for panel number 1. I would like to invite, first of all, the moderator. And just in case you were asking, who will be the moderator for panel number 1? And that person is no other than Dr. Monique Sarias. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She is an indigenous woman who grew up in Oriala, an indigenous village along the Corentyne River in Guyana. As an educator with 15 years of experience, she has served in various capacities. Dr. Sarias is a lecturer within the Faculty of Education, and we're here in the Education Lecture Theater. And she serves as the project lead for the Mauka Tawa, Matau Forest Campus, University of Guyana. Monique holds a Doctor of Education in Leadership and Innovation from Arizona State University. She has a Bachelor of Education from the University of Guyana, and she is currently pursuing a Master of Laws in International Business and International Law from the University of Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Monique Sarias to the microphone. And as she comes, I would like to identify the panelists who Dr. Sarias will introduce in due course, but I would like them to come up and take their seats. Ms. Unika Jervis, Ms. Rosalinda Rasul, Ms. Evie Kanai Gocharan, and Lisa Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Eureka. All right, so we have Ms. Evie Gocharan, CEO and majority shareholder of a diversified group of companies operating in a lot of different areas, and you can probably share some of that with us. But what I found interesting in your bio is Director of Programs for Women in Energy in Guyana. And we're going to leave it up to you to tell us a little bit more about that, like how you got there, what advice you have for younger women, and even probably older women too, who think that they probably can't do anything more with their lives. And so this is a space for us to both inspire women regardless of their age. So thank you for joining us. We also have Unika Jarvis, who I had the pleasure of meeting on one of her runs with Stride 592. Put your hands up if you know of Stride 592. Put your hand up if you ran with Stride 592. Okay, great. And in her bio, I found it very interesting to intersect with not just running, but mental health as well, and how you were able to frame that in such a way that can relate to younger people. And you're driving a movement that I've seen other people following as well. We have different run clubs starting up, and it's, you know, it's a domino effect is happening. So you can probably tell us a little bit more about that later on. She's also a graduate of the Bishop's High School. I saw some people with with their bishops, yeah? Yeah, thank you. And we also have environmental biology and a master's degree in education administration. So there's an intersect with environment and education, so that's quite interesting. We have Lisa Thompson sitting next to me, and she is an artist, I'll say that first. She is also accomplished in so many different fields like program and project management, over 20 years of experience, and she's currently the project director, country representative for the Justice Education Society of British Columbia, and she works along with women, girls, and indigenous peoples, and I will let you share a little bit more on that in a few minutes. Ms. Rosalinda Rasul, thank you so much for joining us. She's the head of the Diaspora Unit at Guyana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, overseeing national diaspora affairs. And we met at a conference recently, so it's nice to see you in another space and in person this time. Ms. Eureka Primus, thank you so much for being here with us. She is the president of the Guyana Miners Association, and that's really impressive, and also the vice chairman of the Board of Guyana Geology and Mines Commission. So we have women in different diverse fields and who can speak about what their path and what has led them to this junction in their lives. And so we're gonna start first with, we're gonna start from this end, coming this way, Ms. Eureka first. If you can just share with us your experience, what does it mean to you to be here in a space where other women are also looking at you, other girls are looking at you, and maybe you can share your journey with us and what you hope to inspire.
So growing up in the mining community of Baratika, we had early exposure to not only mining, but also the impacts of mining on the community, on the environment, as well as on the social aspects of the ecosystem of mining. From that, growing up in high school, moving to Georgetown and having the culture transition, as well as owning my own mining operation from age 18, there are various aspects of our lives that we see the need to not only play a part in our economy, but also contribute to the positive development of our country and try to balance some good with the harm being caused from actions, whether knowing or unknowing, directly or indirectly. Recognizing that there are younger generations that are looking up to us, especially not only from the mining areas and from hinterland communities that oftentimes don't get as much focus or access to opportunities as others. We do have to be responsible in how we contribute, and at all times in decision making and in having conversations, ensure that we consider the realities of everyone beyond the city, as well as how the decisions that we make in boardrooms trickle down to the persons who they ultimately affect.
Thank you for sharing that. I have one more question for you. If you can comment on, perhaps, if this was your experience, being in a perceived male-dominated field.
So for me, I had it twofold because one, I was young. When I first became president, I was 24. When I first became vice chairman for GGMC during those periods, I was also 24. But they did not know until my birthday rolled around. So there were persons who I was on the board with whose children I went to school with. So they see you always as a child, and oftentimes when you make contributions, they may not take full note, but when someone else repeats it, it's suddenly valid. So you do have the experience of your voice only being important when it's echoed by other people in the room, and being able to not only recenter the conversation, but also to ensure that your contributions are noted. With regards to being a woman in mining, it has different implications based on where you're from. For me, I think I had a bit of privilege because my family was in mining. For persons who it is their first venture, people may not be able to associate you with a family or associate you with a group. It is a very different experience, especially because mining is one of the areas where initial capital and expansion capital is not readily accessible from the bank. So it's oftentimes built on trust and reputation. So we do recognize as well that there are persons who are facing significant challenges. So even while, and as current Vice Chancellor mentioned, we have made a lot of progress, there's still a lot of areas that need not only focus, but will to change. We have a number of representation with regards to boards and national boards, but we're at a stage now where having one woman involved is not an accomplishment. So when we shift towards having gender representation quotas on boards, we can say that we've arrived. We're not there yet. When we look at actually conducting gender audits in the industry, not only company gender audits, but even ministerial gender audits, because every time we see a focus on women, it so happens to coincide with International Women's Day. And during the entire year, we still have issues that women are facing and issues that women are tabling that are not really given the focus and attention that it should. So moving from being a token to being actually taken seriously and having the will to progress where we are with regards to our gender strategy, which we don't have any, and actually developing a national gender strategy is really critical.
Thank you so much for your contributions in not only being there, but also representing women and knowing that we still have not arrived as yet and it's a work in progress. Thank you for touching on that. We're going to move to Ms. Evie now and share your experience as well. And you can add to what the conversation has started with.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to Selwyn once again for organizing this forum. You asked a bit about my experience with now becoming the Director of Programs for Women in Energy. That actually started back in 2018 when I founded the Girls Plus initiative, which was a data capture program to understand how women were using technology in Guyana, and actually, if they were understanding the rapid progression of technology and how it would affect our lives. The University of Guyana actually played a very important role in that, in giving me access to women at different levels of education, as well as doing surveys and what do you call it, small groups, around the country. So that data actually went on to attract funding rather for various other initiatives. And in 2019, it attracted a global nonprofit, Girls in Tech. And Girls in Tech then established through the organization a Guyana chapter. And that Guyana chapter was able to have a few MOUs with various organizations, one of them being the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we went on to do maybe 2 or 3 years of programming through GCCI with our teen internship. The leadership program that we run through that was designed by Girls in Tech. So after that, and serving at the Georgetown Chamber, I joined Women in Energy to continue to do programs that, as we evolve in our roles as women in this economy and the industries that are now available for women to fill positions in, that we still have to navigate those challenges that Dr. Mohammed would have spoke of. And even though we're recognized as the most rapid growing economy and we have very nice shiny buildings, in our landscape, there's still a lot of challenges. There's still a lot of hurt, even, I would say. Some of the programs that we have designed in Women in Energy address certain things as domestic violence and being able and supporting single mothers who want to enter those spaces of energy in Guyana. So my experience has been almost a decade, and not only using data to make decisions, but using data to attract funding for women's initiatives, and being able to communicate that at different levels. It's not always black and white, like Yuri would say, depending on the moment in time and the position where you are. Different women will experience different things, and I think conversations like these are really important because we often think that we're probably on the same wavelength, or there's always someone with a blind side that they don't understand what the next woman is experiencing or even is experiencing. It's really important that we're understanding that as we grow as an economy or as we grow as a nation, that we cannot just ignore the fact that women are an integral part of that. At one point I was given a presentation, I don't have the updated data at the moment, but we're split 50-50 in terms of our population. So when you look at rapid development, how could we ignore 50% of our population and say that we want to have these goals by a certain time? So progression is more than the numbers we see on the screen or the money in our bank accounts. It's about ensuring that the entire population has not only the opportunities, and we talk about equity and equality, and they kind of sound tired now, right? Those words sound really tired now. But it is really, really important to kind of have a self-understanding, understanding of who you are and where you need to be present and how you maybe need to position yourself, especially for those women that want to go further than they currently are. And nobody can be responsible for that except you. You have to take stock. And even if you don't know how, being aligned with organizations like Brand Youth, with maybe clubs at the university or many other women support organizations, now will help you to understand where you are, where you need to be, and where you could go in the future.
Thank you so much for giving us a thorough explanation of where you are and how you understand women's position in Guyana in a growing economy. I like that you talked about data and using data in decision making, but also understanding that the statistics are actual people and women involved if we're talking about women. And I find it so interesting with data sometimes because sometimes the research can also be on women rather than with women. And so I find that's an interesting area. So I think Lisa may want to talk a little bit about that later on. So maybe you can keep that. Yeah, let's move on to Ms. Jarvis. Thank you so much. And yeah, so we're on to you and sharing your experience where you are right now, maybe some of the challenges you have faced. What advice do you have for women in terms of becoming their best selves?
So, good afternoon, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to sit here, to be here, and to really to be in this room with you in this building. So that question is like so layered for me. I am here, I sit here because 4 years ago, I was here home celebrating a significant birthday of a dear friend, and just quit my job in the US and without a plan. And I have to believe that I did that, had the courage to do that during a COVID time, the time of COVID, because my ancestors were here, right? So at the tender age of 13, my parents took us from Guyana. You know, lovingly, jokingly, I say they took us. And so for me, here, it's really re-engaging with that little girl, learning what it was like to be a grown woman, and to ask that question of what would it have been like if I had grown up here? And so me being here right now and having this opportunity to interact, really it's a love project. It's an opportunity for me to reconnect and to get the love that I think I missed. And so with the work that I do, and you know, as you introduced and you said, you know, Stride 592, and thank you guys so much for knowing what Stride 592 is, but it really is a labor of love. What I realized was that the Guyana that I knew when I was you know, a teenager at Bishops and New Comenius, it was filled with love, right? I was like in this community of women and strong women and a mom and grandmothers and even an amazing dad that was just really loving. And I remember, you know, being in that community where it was like your neighbors knew and they held you accountable. And I think that a lot of people here know that, of where, you know, you were brought up by community. And I felt like when I came back to visit that one particular time, it was kind of missing, you know, because there was that development that was happening, right, that you talk about, and we were, you know, kind of busy around wanting to take advantage of all the wonderful development and things that were happening. And what I knew was that we could exist in two worlds. And what I knew was that a way to do that was for us as a people, and I guess specifically as women, to really have the opportunity to think about our own health and our own wellness. And the easiest thing, the thing that all of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers did, was walk. And it was something that I was doing in another country for people that wasn't necessarily my own. And it was this opportunity to say, you know what, I can do that. I can try this thing. I can act. I can, you know, give this gift. And if it worked, okay, you know. And it did. And so, or I think it is. I'm hoping that it is, right? And so for me, it's just about really listening to that voice and putting forward this system, this opportunity, this idea, and hoping and praying every day that somebody follows and everybody feels the same joy that I know that I feel from having the opportunity to walk and run and move my body in community with somebody else. So
I love how you brought community into that and sense of identity into this conversation. And I like that you are thinking not just taking care of yourself, but taking care of others as well. And I think a lot of us as women in the room can relate to us looking after everyone else. And sometimes we do that at our own expense and at our own not sleeping, not eating, because we're looking after someone else. And so I am really happy that you touched on that aspect of it, because while we do that and it is good, in the long term it's not good if it hurts us in the process. And so how do we balance that care that we want to share with others for ourselves and taking care of ourselves? And it's not just a picture on Instagram, self-care Saturday. It's not just a post. It's intentionality, and how do we do that? Not just in spaces like this or at important events, but in our everyday lives as well. Thank you for bringing that into the conversation. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I'll just,
Thank you, no problem. We're going to move on with Ms. Russell. Did I say your name right? Okay, thank you. So maybe you can share with us your perspective on this as well, what you have learned along the way from other women, and what is it that you hope to share with others who are here or elsewhere.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll start by saying, I hope I remember the name correctly. It was C.S. Lewis that said that he came to Christianity screaming and kicking through a door, meaning that it wasn't something that he wanted, but it happened based on experiences. So coming back to your question, where it talks about women and what I've learned and how am I going to influence women, it wasn't something that I actually planned on doing growing up, basically. And I'll be very frank. I'm listening to amazing women talk about their experiences and being so intentional and so focused that this is what we want to do. I mean, I admire women like Evie, who sets out programs that targets young girls and entrepreneurs and the mining field and all of these different areas, community. I was not like that. For me, it was growing up and being the best that I could be as an individual. But life takes you on a different goal and a different purpose, and then it weaves you through so many experiences, then it gets you back to a purpose and a focus that is now bigger than yourself and involves a lot of people. And I can look at this from two perspectives, actually, from a personal perspective and then a professional perspective. So I'm going to start with the professional and then the personal for a very good reason. On the professional perspective, it was never my intention to be where I am today in the world of business and even policy. I wanted to be a medical doctor. I fought with God for many years as to why he never allowed me to go into the medical field. Because I'm like, well, I was going to help people. I give them back their health. I go to the hospital. I see where the doctors behave, nurses behave. I'm like, really, God? You took me out of this for that? And I could have done better at this one here. So I never got over that. But throughout the experiences in all of my career choices or the different organizations I've served, it has always been an eye-opener for people. And I had to learn to adopt that it wasn't just in the medical field that I wanted to go in where I can make a difference to whether it's women, little girls, even male in the environment. All of the jobs that I've had has been in areas where it was always male dominated. But it's an interesting that I listened to Dr. Paloma talked about when somebody asked her what it's like to be that female VC. I actually share that sentiment because I never saw anything in any of those boardrooms and any of my experiences of a male female. I've literally gone into boardrooms and meetings where I'm the only female in it, and I'm leading that meeting practically with all of these men who are highly educated, very experienced in their different ways. And I have never once said, oh, am I the only female here? I've never thought about it. I've never seen that, and maybe that's a good thing. And I think that is something we need to help our women and young girls, the ones that are in school growing up there, to understand their feminist, their features, to understand their characteristics, to understand their gender, but at the same time to know when that becomes important for them to consider and when it is time to put it aside because you're now in a field where you need to be equal as everyone else. And if you start out by thinking, I'm female, you're male, you already set yourself at a disadvantage because already the society crafts that as a female, there are certain things you can do, certain things you can't do, maybe because of your anatomy, because of the way you are, the way you think, maybe because of your emotion. But once you train a young girl, you help them to understand that you're just the same in so many capacities as male, then you remove immediately so many things that have become emotional, mental hurdles to them actually, and you help them to start open up to get into that ability that they want. So I've gone into boardrooms, I've had my fair share of arguments, I've led, I've came out successful, never once saying that I'm a female, you're all the males there. So that was the first thing, and that's something that I've learned over in my careers. Even now, I sit in many boardrooms, I've sit in many meetings, I've been in an organization where we're all led by lots of men, and again, that has never come up. And it got me thinking, in our society, are women's experiencing the same thing? And I'm afraid, unfortunately, they're not, because we train them to say, and our persons would come up to VC and says, how is it to be a VC, the first female VC? But you know, it wasn't her feminism or her gender that got her here. It was much more than that. It was her qualifications or experience that got it. But why didn't they ask her something related to what she's used that experience and that education for in the benefit of the University of Guyana? And this is where the problem comes in, I think. And I think for me, I had to learn that throughout my career or the different jobs that I've had. And then it brings me to the other point as well, on the personal level. Again, you always go through, so you as a child, and this is where you talk about the little girl there. Girls in particular, yes, men, little boys do, but girls in particular, we dream, we fantasize. Prince, you know, and coming on the knight in the shining armor, once upon a time, happily ever after, and then life comes. It is not a fairy tale, for sure. And you start experiencing all of that. And again, like my professional career, the experiences that I've had in life was not exactly as I anticipated. And I usually go back to God so many times. It's like, Lord, we've had this conversation many times. You're not listening. Your idea of a joke is not really a joke, right? And then I would say, you know, I prayed for this, but hold on. The prayer has been answered for that person. That was not what I prayed for, God. You're mixing up this whole thing. But there was always purpose. There's always intent behind everything, because you have to learn, you have to feel, you have to experience. And this is why I started by saying, I never wanted at any point in time to come and be an inspiration to any woman or any girl or set out to do it. But the experiences made me alert that there are people out there that needed to be motivated. Women particularly needed to be motivated. Women who needed to understand themselves and how they can become more of what God made them or intended for them. And I specifically recall my mother, and I love my mother so much, and both my parents, that my mom had never got the opportunity to go very far in school because of the times that she grew up in. My mother made sure that, and my father, both parents, I love them both parents ensured that my sister and I, two girls, got what they never got, which was an education. That was the first thing they saw as very important to the development of your girls, because particularly my mother, knew what it was like to be a female in a certain era, in a certain time, and she didn't want her daughters to be that way. I'm the one with the degrees and everything. My mother didn't get to go to school. Yet when we go to the supermarket, my mother would select 10 things, and she's like, okay, what's the total of this here? Now, me and my degree, I'm setting on 340, 1010, and I'm doing all my columns, and I'm going to add this column, put the number, and then take this number over. And my mother, in a blink, she got the total. And then she looks at me, she's like, that's correct, right? And I'm like, yes, that is correct, right? And I'm still setting on the totals. So that is something very interesting, because she didn't go very far in school to get that degree, but that didn't make her any less of a woman or any less of a being that can compete at any level. She solves problems, she's very wise in all of it there. And then it makes me wonder, how does society put that focus on girls and women? What, do you have to be qualified? You have to look a certain way? No, it doesn't work that way. And then I'm going to end by saying this here too. It brings me to this forum that we're at. While it's fantastic, and Selwyn, I think it's fantastic what you're doing here. I asked myself, I'm going to be devil's advocate, is this always the place or the right forum for these conversations? And I do think there's a time and place for a certain conversation, but I also think, what about the little village somewhere in the quarantine? Or the little village somewhere in Region 1? Or the little village somewhere in Region 3? Where there's a lot of real issues facing women who will never hear this conversation. Even if it's live streamers on social media, they'll never hear it. Or maybe in our fantastic language, they may never understand it because nobody's ever broken it down to them in their language. And this is why and that's why I started by saying the life experiences makes you aware of all of these things. So when you go out there, yes, I can take the suit off, I can get into my comfort clothes, jeans, and then you can go into a community and help a woman or a group of women actually to become better at war, to break some of the barriers down. And I love the 3 questions that you have, you know, what we need to get rid of, what we can adopt basically, and I'm just paraphrasing it, and what we need to create for ourselves. These amazing questions, and I do think that these are some things that women need to fundamentally tackle and then take it out to all the villages basically.
Love your perspective from both the professional and the personal angle. I love your honesty and vulnerability as well, and understanding that as much as we're all women here and we have all led in various areas, that there are women who may not be recognized as leaders, but they actually are. And it's really good to see that, and it's good that everyone can have that sense that you don't need to look a certain way. You don't need to have a certain paper to say that you have made or you're successful. So I am thankful for that contribution, and thanks for reminding us of that. And of course, these conversations should not just stop here. So thanks for bringing that perspective in. Lisa, on to you. So I feel like you can piggyback on so many different of the conversations that started earlier, and whichever angle you would like to take it from, I'm going to leave it in. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Monique. And good evening, everyone. And I think it's perhaps fortuitous that I'm coming after you, Ms. Rasul. There's a lot that we have in common, and there's some part at which we diverge a little in our views, which I think is why we're all here, to give different views. Because while you don't necessarily pay attention to the gender balance, I always do. And maybe I always do because of the work that I do. And I do anti-violence work. I work with communities, and you'll be happy to know, some indigenous communities, where we talk about violence and keeping women and girls and indigenous people safe and improving their access to justice. So I am always conscious, wherever I go, is there a man? How safe am I? And how safe are other women who are in this space? And I think as a woman doing that work, we go into villages and in Georgetown as well, and a lot of women do not have that privilege and I think luxury of not consciously being, aware of who is in that space that they're occupying. And it kind of translates for me as well that when I get into a professional space, I'm always doing that balance check, always. Last week we did training with the judges, and I counted how many female judges there were in the room, and how many male judges there were. And I was really, really encouraged that there were so many female judges, and even the chief judge of the Provincial Court of British Columbia, who came to do the work for us, she said to me afterwards, there are a lot more women in the room now. She's been coming here since 2015, and so she was also aware of that balance, that gender balance. But also, I think coming from, I grew up on the Essequibo coast in Adventure, where the ferry used to come in, and raised predominantly by my grandmother, maternal grandmother, and my mother. And so you also have that village kind of perspective that has helped to make me who I am today. And it was also, like your mom, and my grandmother went to, as she used to say, standard 4, which is grade something or the other now. I'm aging myself by for me it was primary 4. But she went up to there. My mother, she insisted that my mother get an education because that was her way out of poverty. That was her way to independence. And therefore my mother also encouraged us. There were 4 of us, 2 boys, 2 girls. And so there was no boy chores and girl chores and any of that. She was determined that we were all going to do the same things so that we could all be equally independent in a world that was male dominated, and that still is. And so the work I do now, prior to that, I worked in public health with HIV. And again, you know, you saw that disparity in the experts. They were mostly male, even though a lot of the bigger percentage of the persons affected by HIV, it was women. The experts were mostly male, whether you were looking at lab technicians or doctors or nurses, any of the experts. And then now in the field of gender-based violence, where we do a lot of work with police officers, male-dominated field. And you know, you're going into situations where participants are a product of their environment. And I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible so that when I turn up for meetings next week, I can still have them. But they're a product of their environment, and our environment is one that is not very friendly for women and girls. And it may offend some people, but the fact is, and it doesn't matter if you're in a little village or you're in the city, so it is a culture of violence against women. And it is one of the previous speakers spoke of behavior change. And I think Dr. also spoke when we were talking about my work. She said, but what about behavior change? And that is a huge part of it, looking at how do we change those behaviors. And so, you know, you mentioned that I'm an artist as well. That's how I stay sane. Because anybody who does anti-violence work, you understand, you know that there is a lot that you have to listen to, that you have to work with, and you're doing it in environments where there are very little services, where there are persons who are providing services who are not properly trained or don't know. It's like the devil in the deep blue sea. Which one are you going to choose? And it's also happening in an environment where there's a lot of work going on to help put systems in place to address how women and girls and indigenous people can better access justice, helping them to understand how the system works, what they're supposed to expect, and then on the other hand, working with police officers and so on so that they understand what the laws are saying, how they should be applied, and helping them to also understand how the system works or how it should work. But doing this against the backdrop where sometimes you go with someone to a police station and then they will ask the woman who's been beaten, what did you do? What did you do to the man? And then also they turn around, and some people may not understand this phrasing, and hustle the women, make a pass at the very women who are victims, and then trying to explain to them why this is not okay and why this is re-traumatizing somebody who's already been re-traumatized. And so, so a lot of where I come from and the way I look at things comes from that sort of experience that is really no different, whether we're working in indigenous communities or Indo-Guyanese or Afro-Guyanese in the town, in the city, in little villages. It is just that culture that has taken a hold of a lot of our people. And so for little girls who are looking on, and for everybody, including myself, it is understanding that you have a responsibility to yourself as well to be aware and to try and keep yourself safe in a society that is not necessarily going to keep you safe. When I get home in the evening and I'm driving in my yard, I reverse. And I am always scanning. And I live in a residential neighborhood. I am always scanning, and then I get in my yard, I shift back into drive, and in my head I'm always thinking, anybody runs through this gate, I will paste them up against my fence. You know? But that's our reality.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You have dealt with a very sensitive topic in a nuanced way, and I think we can all relate to all that you have mentioned. Maybe not the pacing part, but we do understand where you're coming from. I believe that our panelists have done an amazing job in sharing their experiences with us, and we have learned something from each of them. They have shared gems with us today, and I think what resonates with me, at least, is understanding that there are gaps. We know what the gaps are. We have an idea of where the gaps should be filled, and there's so many thoughts going through my mind. Sorry. So I was thinking about what do we do from here on. And I want to encourage all of you to keep doing the work that you're doing, keep inspiring. I was speaking to someone from the audience earlier who mentioned that she has a mentor who is a woman, and she is also, in a sense, a mentor to other women as well. And whatever you're doing, keep doing it in those spaces and areas of influence. And yeah, thank you. So now we're going to go into the question and answer segment. And Lisa, is someone managing the chat from questions from the virtuals? Okay, thank you. So we can have it open. You can raise your hands, and then someone will bring a mic to you. You can ask a specific question or a general question, and anyone from the team can take it up. Thank you. Oh, lovely. We have a question from the front row. Go ahead. If you can state your name, please, and then your question. We'll give you a prize for being the first.
Much appreciated. Good night, everyone. My name is Aruni Seeley. You might see more of me throughout the remainder of the night, but for right now, my question is directed to Lisa, I believe your name was?
Lisa.
No, Lisa and... Pardon?
Rosalinda.
Rosalyn.
Rosalinda.
Rosalinda. Rosalinda? Awesome, Rosalinda. I think something stood out to me on what you said. You're being in these spaces where it was primarily males, yes, but you didn't have the awareness or you didn't have the realization. What is your goal now, being in this conversation? What can you take away? And then what can you see yourself doing in future as you recognize your part as the woman in this, as the woman, or the only woman in many of these spaces? What is changing about the mindset that you had before, and how can you take that into your life?
Great. Thank you so much for that question. One of the things, and I always revert to our experiences in life because it shapes us, it guides us, and it directs our path. Whilst for me, it was a good thing, and it always has been a good thing to not have that consciousness when I walk into a boardroom full of men, because I can debate them, I can argue with them, I can present my facts on probably the same level, even higher levels of it, basically, and walk out successfully. There could be a danger to that, and that danger is what I've heard here this afternoon, in that there is a need to be sensitive to other issues, particularly to women, to other women, because not all women are the same, and they will not see things the way I see. They will not experience things the way I experience. Another woman may, for example, even with other women in a boardroom, may feel intimidated or be very conscious or something, or if a male starts to open his mouth and gets very vocal on certain things, they may start to retract. And they may not, although they have great ideas, that kind of makes them scared. So learning what I learned, or knowing what I know from the way I operate in a boardroom, for example, and then understanding the sensitivities and the challenges of women outside, or what they fear, it helps me to marry the two, that I could take my experiences, understand the challenges and the fears or the apprehensions that they have, and how do I help them to understand that you can walk into this space here and you can do just the same as I do, but now I understand how they think, what their fears are. If I didn't have that understanding before, and a woman comes and tells me that, I'm afraid to do it, I'd be like, that should be easy for you. But you see, that would be the haughtiness of perhaps of not being aware of women's sensitivity. So coming back to a point, Elisa mentioned that she's always conscious of the male-female thing. It did bring me to a point of having that consciousness, but not to the point that it impacts the way I relate to them or take hold of opportunities. And this is what I want to help women who don't understand that or are in different spaces to understand. So that, yes, we understand the sensitivities, but I want you, when you walk into any opportunity, you're just as good as a male. Now that brings me to another point. If, like, for example, I'm chair of an organization, and the same thing happens. I have meetings, lots of male there, it doesn't bother me one bit. But there is an issue, for example, of a department headed by a male. Most of the employees under his charge are females, and there was a medical issue with one of the women. The doctor said she needed to go home immediately. He looked at it. He's thinking along the company lines, and he's like, well, you know what, if we send you home, as for the doctor's wishes, we'll be exposed here. So work the day out, and then from tomorrow you stay home. So I kind of understood that because he was looking out for the company, and if she had gone, it leaves the company exposed, basically. So a female had to step in, and we allowed it to say, look, have a look at the medical, what do you think? And have a female understand then what this medical meant, says send her home immediately, as per the doctor wishes. So those are some of the things that you kind of learn and have to balance in the workspace, because again, had I been the person that I would have been, I'd be like, you know what, I probably might have agreed with the guy. The company is going to be exposed. We need to look at the interests of the company. But you know what? Not always it's about the company or always about profits. It's about human beings as well. And when we give women the space, we learn, and then we adapt to their situations, and we help them to come up to the same level using our experiences, then I think we do a lot for a lot of women. And like I said, for me, the biggest takeaway here, listening to people, is how can I take all of these experiences that I'm hearing and then go back into my space and make the place a different place for women of all shades, all categories, all backgrounds, basically, all groups.
Thank you. I think we're going to clap for that. Do we have anyone else with a question? Okay, we have a hand over here. Thank you. Your name and your question, please. If we can have anyone else indicate, and so I can just immediately hand the mic over to you in the interest of time. One more.
My question is, how does one move from losing their femininity?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How does one move from invisibility to influence without losing your femininity?
So there's a key word to say there, influence. And I'll go back to the point where I say you need to be grounded in who you are. What is the influence that you want to have over what community you're working with? So that's really very important. You all look so beautiful today, every woman here. I would never question your embracing femininity. I myself, I have 4 girls, so it's it's a house of women. And it's a real balance with my husband, who is also a co-founder in the business, who our whole lives are kind of interwoven and intertwined. And then I'm the CEO of the company. And my family was in business before I was married. So people would usually call my husband Mr. Kanai instead of calling me Mrs. Gorcharan. So I had the influence in the business community before he did. So when I say it's a balance, I don't mean that we need to kind of balance our femininity. What we need to do is balance our feminine energy. Because we throw this word leadership around, okay? But we forget that there are different types of leadership. And even in those types of leadership, there is KPIs and macros and all these different things that define the type of leader that we are. And we also forget that our leadership capacity has to flex within different roles. Like I said, balance, right? I have 4 girls. The way I relate to their father in the home is important. The way I relate to my co-worker in the workplace with our female employees is important. the way that I relate to him on a one-to-one basis, whether we're talking about business or whether we're talking about family home. It's really important. And even though that's a personal relationship, it also goes beyond that with other male colleagues. There was one incident a few months back, a male employee stepped into our office who was majority female, our admin office, and he raising his voice is very elevated. And I looked at him and I said, you can make your point without being so loud. And after he left, the other female said to me, you know, this is a practice he does regularly. He will come in and he will shout and he will raise his voice. And I said to them, why haven't you ever said anything? Why haven't you ever complained? And they said to me, they're like, because, you know, you handle these things so well. We don't want to be complaining about it and you're handling it and you're not fazed by it. And I said simply to them, I said, you're not me. You're looking at 30 plus years of experience. You're looking at being raised by a certain type of parentage. You're looking at being exposed to different things in leadership, being exposed to different learning. You can't take my energy and own it as your own. You have to grow into your own energy, and it starts with dealing with people's attitudes and their instinct to overpower you with their personality. So it's really important when you think about influence that we're not adopting other people's influence. We have to understand our own influence, and that it's not about femininity, but it's about our feminine energy, because femininity is something that is inherent, I think it is. And our feminine energy is what we can manage. And especially in spaces of leadership, we're not managing roles, we're not managing organizations, we're managing people. And there are people that are going to say that you don't deserve to be in this role because you're a woman. And there are people that will say that there's no other person that can handle this role because you're a woman. And it's up to you to decide where you're going to be in the spaces you're going to be in. And there are spaces that allow you to really exercise your feminine energy.
Thank you so much for your contribution. I believe that is all the time we have for questions. But I do want to end on the note that we all have different ways of approaching it as well. And thank you for adding that light on, you know, our own sense of self coming out there and not trying to be like somebody else, but owning ourselves. Thank you for that. We're going to go into a little break, and you will have the opportunity to meet the panelists if you have a question, or if you guys are not opposed to it, maybe they can connect with you.
So I just wanted to make an addition to the first question with regards to applying gender lenses in boardrooms. And one of the things that I think is critical for each of us to do is to be a lot more strategic in how we open doors for others. Take, for instance, one, listening to the people who you're serving. So during my first tenure, I had asked for any woman in any position, if you're facing any challenges, let me know. And in the same conversations I was having with the current chairman at the time, what are the challenges that the commission was facing? What are from the vice chairmen as well? And find a way in which you can sync what the agency needs with what the women need, so that you're reaching the agency's goals, fine, but also embedding in that, allowing women to ascend within the agency or ascend within the spaces in which we occupy. Because while we may have few persons who are representatives on the board, how do you get more women into upper management so that they can ascend to the board? How can you ensure that the experiences that we're having are not limited to us? And one of the things in which I found was critical in supporting that process was creating a staff development policy. Because the women in the agency at the time were complaining about being overlooked for training opportunities and upskilling opportunities, especially within a year after giving birth. Because apparently if you have a toddler, your brain shuts off, so you can no longer study. So and in creating the policy, ensuring that there is no restrictions to whether or not you have a child of any age, whether you were pregnant. So in doing so, they were able to use the policy, which assists the commission with their strategic growth, as well as upward mobility and their goals, but at the same time, it wasn't really for them. It was just that there wasn't an excuse in keeping women in certain positions or keeping women in lower administrative positions within the agency. So while we occupy space, we still have to look at how do we ensure that while we're there, we're making a lasting impact for those who are coming not only after us, but having it enshrined in a way that is permanent.
Thank you so much for those insightful words. Thank you. We'll close off. Thank you, Lisa, for allowing us with the flexibility of the extra time. This may cut down on our break, though. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you again to Dr. Sarias and the panelists from panel number 1. It is now time for us to welcome the panelists for panel number 2, from tradition to transformation, how women entrepreneurs are transforming economies and navigating male-dominated fields. Panel number 2 consists, and I would kindly ask that the panelists come up and take their seats on the stage as I call your names. Miss Kathy Smith. Miss Crystal Lamb. Let's give them a hand. Come on, let's encourage them. They're amazing ladies doing great things. And they will tell us about navigating the male-dominated fields and how they're doing their transformative work. Ms. Deborah Francis, Dr. Shanti Prasad, and Aruni Seeley. And this panel is going to be moderated by Kenita Roberts. And let me tell you a little bit about Kenita, and then Kenita will tell you about her panelists. Kenita Roberts is a 26-year-old environmental professional. Kenita has background in volunteerism, and she is also an entrepreneur, and she co-owns Infuse with her husband, and she leads other amazing initiatives that we'll hear about as during the course of her discussion with her panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenita Roberts and panel number 2.
Good evening, everyone.
Give them a hand,
and
please.
thank you, Lardette, for the lovely introduction. I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. And panel number 2 seeks to continue it and even dive a bit deeper. So as we know, this panel's topic is tradition, from tradition to transformation. And today I have 5 lovely ladies. They're very diverse in their backgrounds. I'm going to quickly introduce each of them. So right next to me, I have Miss Kathy Smith. She is the first female president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and she currently serves as the vice chairperson of the Private Sector Commission. She's also the managing director of Dynotech Construction Chemicals. She holds a degree in business management and graduate certificate in management. She's passionate about advocating for women's leadership and capacity building. Thank you for being a part of our panel this evening. So next I have Ms. Crystal Lam-Karian, and she's a Guyanese entrepreneur and fashion designer from Linden. She's the founder of Crystal Lam Designs, and she leads a uniform company providing tailored solutions and PPE supplies. She encourages women to encourage their potential and take ownership of their transformation. Next, I have Ms. Deborah Francis. She's a communications specialist with over 20 years' experience in media, marketing, and corporate communications. Currently, she freelances as a radio announcer on 3 popular radio stations. and she uses radio as a platform to educate and inspire listeners. She's passionate about helping others become the best versions of themselves. Next, I have Dr. Shanti Prasad, and she is a servant leader committed to empowering others through a teach others to fish philosophy. She's an expert in leadership development, corporate training, and executive coaching. She lives by the motto, be the change you wish to see in the world. Last but not least is Aruni Seeley. She's an architecture student, youth leader, and public speaker. Emerging advocate for policy and development within Guyana's built environment. She is passionate about teaching civic engagement and youth development. Thank you. Thank you to each of the panelists for being a part of this initiative. Now, I'm going to get straight into it. I have 3 questions that I want to throw out. So, I will direct these questions to direct persons, and everybody will get a different question, but some persons might get the same question, right? And this is based on your background, right? So, my first question will be purely based on our topic, which is how women entrepreneurs or leaders are transforming economies and navigating cultural male-dominated fields. And I'd specifically like to direct this question to Ms. Kathy Smith.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I thought the question was, anybody could have grabbed at it. But before I give my answer, of course, there's some lovely people in the room. Madam Roxanne George, good evening. You and I think we started our day together, now we're ending it. Yeah, we were busy trying to be active, say we walk in, whatever that may mean. Of course, the lovely Dr. Paloma. And Bruce is at the back, hiding with his lovely wife. I met her this afternoon. Bruce is from the U.S. Embassy, doing an excellent job in trade. And of course, all the lovely people in the room, good evening to you all. Entrepreneurship, navigating male-dominated space. The space is a male-dominated space, and as women, we have to navigate it. I think sometimes women do try to get angry, and I mean angry that they're asked, why should I be in a male-dominated space? Because 100 years back, and I keep saying this, us women, we hadn't any interest in corporate world. We were comfortable, taking care of our loved ones, and we find it joyful to do that. And nothing is wrong with that, or nothing was wrong with that. Yes, of course, there are beautiful women like Coco Chanel, who give us our little black dress and our little black pumps and our handbag and so on. So I don't want women to think that if you say you have to navigate the space, it means that you're doing something very technical. The space wasn't designed for you. So what you got to do now, you got to go into the room and you got to navigate the space. We got to fix a space for you. Being the first, you mentioned the first woman president of the GCCI, and I take that with an honor and a privilege to be the first woman president of the GCCI. I also serve as the vice chairman for the Private Sector Commission, the first female vice chairman for the Private Sector Commission. I'm also serving as the chairman for the Board of Industrial Training, the first female. So no way should women try to undervalue that thing called force. You know why? Because I know that I am not the only or was the only eligible woman for that space. A lot of women had said to me that family came first. Katy, I'm aging. And this is a conversation men might not understand. I'm getting into my late 40s. I need my children, so they have to go. Some women's spouses did not allow them to take up those spaces, and they had to go. Some women were fearful of taking up the space. And then, of course, me being the first, heavy scrutiny, the
quiet resistance and the ability to prove myself were some of the things that women did not want to deal with. So that space that you were given as a woman, force of anything, male-dominated space, you have to go into the space and redecorate it. The space wasn't designed for us. And if we keep running away from the space and allowing the men only to take the space, we're going to find some issue there. Male aren't our enemy, and I love what Rosalinda was saying. You know, some women were trained to believe that the enemy is a male. It's not. You have to ensure, you got to know your purpose, why you were put there, what is it that you want to achieve. And if you figure those things out, you go into the room and you balance like them the same way they do. You know, so I say to women, the space was not created for you. You get into the room and you redesign the space. So that is how I try to balance, if there's such a thing you can do in a male-dominated space.
Thank you, Kathy. And as you spoke, there are two things that pop out to me, or two things that came to mind. I am always amazed when somebody is the first of something. It's like the world has been around for so long, and there's still areas that there is the first of something. I always find it amazing. Another thing is that within these spaces, or being the first of something, I've realized that you need to make it, or you need to add your personality and make it for you. And that's how you become successful in those spaces. I also want to direct this same question to Ms. Deborah Francis, because she is also within a male-dominated field.
Good evening. Thanks for the invitation and to be among all of these really awesome women and gentlemen as well. Hi there to you. So indeed, at the moment, I work in a space that is both female and male-dominated, but I once worked in a predominantly male-dominated space for about 4 years. And there are challenges as well as areas to celebrate. I happened to be in that particular space the only person in the actual position, and that was as the GFF Public Relations Officer. I was the first woman, and I had to deal with a number of challenges. First one, this perceived bias that only men are aware of football, that you have to come into this space with a knowledge of football, know all the players, know all the technical bits and pieces. And in addition to that, societal biases, that a woman should not be in the job. For me, those are the key challenges. For me, defining who I am. There's a thought which says, you must define yourself before the world defines you. Who are you before the world defines you? Or told you who you were. And that is what I took into the job. I defined myself. I had to be aware of who I am. Self-awareness is key to progress. And so it was so imperative for me to understand who I was, what I brought to the portfolio. And what I brought to the portfolio was not my technical knowledge of football. What I brought to the portfolio was my technical knowledge and communication, because I was a public relations officer. And so that is what I emphasized, that my portfolio spoke to my strengths. My strength would have been my knowledge of communication, how to navigate that space. And arguably, coming out from that position, I've been one of the most successful, if not the most successful public relations officer to navigate that space. So, because the space has been challenged. Football is not an easy sport to manage, to project, to have people embrace. And so it took some work, but it took the knowledge and the self-awareness to really make an impact. In addition to that, societal knowledge, societal biases that this is a male-dominated space, how dare you, why a woman should be here. Those are things, again, which come with self-awareness. Knowing that, I just worked on my strengths. I played on my strengths. I did my job, did it well, so that the criticisms were merely frivolous, if you like, as opposed to the core of what I produced, the substance of what I represented, what I produced. And so in that sense, I was able to have some sort of focus in the first instance, and in the second instance, be able to document my achievements so that history will record that this is beyond just being female or male. Secondly, in the space that I currently work in, I work in communication, work in media. There's so many biases when it comes to women in the media, so many perceptions, misconceptions, and it's just a very, it's a space where we have to, again, be very conscious of our purpose, because if you go into a space and you just want to be visible, coming back to this question of visibility, visibility could mean different things to different people. And oftentimes people think visibility is just about showing up and people knowing who you are. But it's really an intentional, a very strategic action. If you really want to be visible, you have to first of all know your purpose. Why do you want to be visible? What is it that you hope to achieve from this visibility? So when persons come to me and ask me, oh, you know what? I want to be out there. Out there where? To whom? To what? Who is your target audience? What is it you like to achieve from that? And I think those are the questions we need to ask ourselves so that we can then better position ourselves for success.
Thank you, Deborah. I actually have a follow-up question based on what you would have said. How did you handle the criticisms, at least mentally? Because you said it was frivolous, but how did you handle it? Or how was it frivolous to you? How did you handle it?
So again, it came back to who I define myself as and what contribution I could make in that space. When I examined the criticisms were more like, because you are a woman, how dare you come and tell us what to do when football has always been managed by men. It's all administratively managed by men, never had a woman in the PR position, and this perception that you had to be knowledgeable of football to make it, I guess, known, to have people understand what it is. But again, it's about knowing who you are, defining who I am, knowing my strengths, knowing my weaknesses as well, just being self-aware and being able to more represent my strengths and project it in such a way that at the end of the day, my successes would have been documented and it really outweighed my strengths. So I didn't give much weight to because you're a woman. Because I'm a woman, I'm strong. Because I'm a woman, I'm capable. Because I'm a woman, I can achieve. I can overachieve. I can do this better than anybody else who would have done it. So that was just my focus going in. And then that's exactly what I did.
Can I, since Deborah and I had the same question, the criticism thing is quite, it's there. Sometimes different people receive it differently. But you know, what, for me, and I say to women, this is how you can figure out how you can manage criticism. I love when women say they've been in the space for a while and they've been doing it right. And I say to them, go back on that. For example, people sometimes ask me, how is it that you're getting into these spaces that are male-dominated, getting these positions that normally goes to male? This is not my first rodeo, I say to them. And I was able to measure my success. You know when my first rodeo started? My first rodeo started at the age of 17. At the age of 17, I was the first person in my family to go to University of Guyana. And that alone shifts something in my mind that I'm capable of doing anything that I put myself to. I can go back a little bit early when I learned something, but the age of 17 was really defining for me. Think about going to university at 17, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I prepared myself there, being being able to be the best at my school with CSEC and all of these things. So sometimes women fail to realize that they have done this, they know how to get it done. So if the next thing comes, the next attack or criticism come, you don't have to get weak or get flustered in it. Remember what you would have done previously when it was thrown to you. But sometimes we do forget our past, right? But we got to remember that, you know what, this is not our first rodeo at this thing. You know, we have been doing this for a while. So go back to how you would have handled it, and then you come back again to it. Just wanted to put that in.
Thank you, and I appreciate the advice as it relates to criticism. Because personally, I feel like it's something that I fear. It's not something I receive a lot of, but if I do, I think it would affect me negatively. So that's why I wanted to dive a bit deeper into it. My next question, I actually want to direct it to Dr. Prasad and Crystal. Okay? So in your own journey, what mindset or expectation did you have to challenge in order to grow as a leader or a woman in society?
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I must say that I think I shouldn't say only women. I think men go through the same thing here with a self-limiting belief that, like, who are you? So if I may say this here personally, my goal is to transform this entire nation. And the person that is closest to me, someone in my family said to me, who are you that you think that you can bring such a change in this country? Don't you think that many others would have tried that? And so there are many, I would say, voices that meant well. They believe that you're a good person, but you're not there. You can't do that. And so there are always going to be these self-sabotaging thoughts that comes and tell you that, oh, you're not good enough for that. You're not capable of that. Like, who are you? You know, and all those thoughts that as it started to come, those are things that you will have to fight against. And personally, it's something that comes many times when something different happens. So, you know, you climb one ladder and you build confidence there, and then something bigger will come again, and that fear will come, and now you have to climb that ladder, or that bigger mountain, if you want to put it that way. But I would say that it's always going to be that fear. Am I good enough? Am I capable of this here? It's like, who am I to do this? And the truth is, for me, it's like I stand every time and I step into a room and I'm like, Lord, I would pray that let them see you. And it's not me. And, you know, everything I've learned through my faith is that I can't do it without God. And I stop relying on my strength to face anything, whether it's in a room with someone trying to do something or help someone or whatever that I'm about to do, how big it might be or how small it might be, is to come to a realization that I can't do it alone. And to keep talking to myself and believing there's something greater in me. And there's not a preaching here, but there's a verse that I always remind myself that I'm made for good works. And I'm made for good works. And I'm here to do good things. And, you know, those I am statements that we say to ourselves to build our confidence. When those times come, that the thoughts that you're not going to be good at this or you're not good enough for this. So those are some of my struggle, I would say, not only myself, but others will go through, and it will keep coming, I think, until you die, until you figure out what you're going to say to yourself that you will believe that will take you to the next level.
And I like the fact that you would have brought that up, because to me that's more of a mental struggle. And sometimes we're our own biggest critic, but you're able to give yourself the affirmations to get past those and reach to your next level. So I'll pass the baton to Crystal.
Could you just repeat the question for me?
Yes, so the question is, in your own journey, what mindset or expectation did you have to challenge in order to grow as a leader or a woman in society?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I think one of the biggest mindset challenges I had to deal with as a woman in business and as a leader is similar to Shanti's, but not the same thing. I think it's believing that we have to be fully prepared before we can step into a room or before we can step into a space. And I'll even give an example, like when Selwyn reached out to me and he said, can you be a part of this panel? My mind went to, am I ready for that? Because I would have stepped away from all the public speaking and all that for quite some time. And my mind went to, but Crystal, are you ready? And then it had to go back to sometimes we're not ready, but we have to step into that space anyways. And that's how confidence is built. It's not on waiting until everything aligns and waiting until we feel fully ready. Because I've learned that time sometimes never comes. Because even when I got into business, I remember leaving the banking industry and I decided, okay, I'm going to start my journey as an entrepreneur. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the connections. I didn't have capital. I didn't have anything. But I said, Crystal, this is a jump you have to make. Because if you stay here longer, you'll probably be here for the rest of your life. So I think one of the biggest mindset challenges or one of the biggest things I've had to learn is that sometimes we have to step into a space before we're ready and not just wait for preparedness. Or you prepare on the way, of course, you make the necessary preparations, but you understand that you have to step out and you have to step into that space even before you feel ready. And I think that's how confidence is built. Because when you step into it and you do it, you're like, okay, I didn't feel ready for this, but I overcame anyway. I got it done. I accomplished. And you're able to step on to bigger things. Like she said, things are always going to come. But when you have that mentality that I can do things that I don't feel ready for, and I can still be successful, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned. I think the other thing was that being a woman who is a leader doesn't necessarily mean I have to give up my femininity or give up what makes me a woman. I think a lot of times women overcompensate because we feel like I have a point to prove. I have to be like the man. So I become harsh and I become hard and I become what I think a good leader should be. But understanding that we are good leaders and the two can coexist. I don't have to be masculine to be a good leader. I can still be feminine, I can still be nurturing, I can still be graceful, and I can lead at an even better capacity than somebody who doesn't have those traits. So I think those are the two main things that I would have learned on my journey.
And if I could also add to everything that's been said already, as you may have known, I am in architecture, so what I would touch on is the engineering aspect of it. And I would say that one of the biggest mind shifts that had to happen when I stepped into engineering as a whole was that my value had to be based on merit before it was on gender. Because when I stepped into this field, the conversation immediately happened was, or the conversation that happened was, there are only so many women architects in Guyana. You don't see many women engineers. The only women architects, they moved and they don't live here anymore. You see males in the field, and these are by males who are in the industry. It's not something that you can ignore because it's the first conversation that you have. Why would you as a woman want to step into this field? And although I speak from architecture and my experience is in architecture, throughout the engineering fields, we all coincide in one place, and that's in experience on site or actually carrying out whatever it is. And I would say that one thing the females share in common, maybe not all, but a vast lot, is that we tend to have to prove ourselves before we're taken seriously. And so you'd find that on site at the very least, men would hear you. What you're speaking is true, what you're speaking is technically backed up. But at the same time, because you're a woman, because there's this existing dynamic within the industry, suddenly your vote doesn't count. Suddenly this perception or this voice does not count. And so it was important for me to make the active shift towards blocking out that noise, is what I'll call it, and continuing to develop myself, continuing to develop the things that I have so that I can root myself in this industry. And another thing, or another point of conversation when I first entered it, was not only are there a little amount of female architects or female engineers, female civil engineers, female structural engineers in Guyana, but you'd hear that the few that were in it, suddenly they got married, they had children, and they dropped out of it. And one of the things that was positioned against me was the biological aspect of being a woman in the engineering field. And so when I considered the conversation of it, it was not just I have to survive in this field, but I also have to challenge the perceptions I have towards myself in this field, but also the perceptions that persons have towards women in general in the field. So you couldn't, I think one of the panelists on the previous panel, or even actually VC had mentioned it, some days she had to pull up her bootstraps and show up when she had domestic issues, when she had other things that were happening. And I understand that in the professional sense, but we tend to have to overcompensate to prove that we are competent, even though we have the validation, the verification to prove it. So I would say that it's important to, as was mentioned before, certainly know yourself, know why you're there, but to continue developing yourself so that your work speaks for itself, so that when someone looks at you, the first thing they're gonna say is not, oh, she's a woman, why is she here? But this is what she has done. This is the work she has shown. And there are going to be some ignorant people along the way who refuse to see it that way. But once your work speaks for everything that you do and everything that you stand for and your goals within the industry that you're in, then you're on the right path and you just continue.
Thank you, Aruni, and thank you, Crystal, for bringing out some really interesting points. And I feel like it really brings this particular question together. Aruni, my specific question to you is, how can young women confidently step into spaces where they feel underrepresented and underrepresented and underdetermined? I like this question for you because you are in the engineering field and you are into public speaking, and I know a lot of other stuff that you're into, but I feel like this question is something that you can answer from a very current point of view.
All right, and the question is, how can young girls?
Yeah, how can young women confidently step into spaces where they may feel underrepresented?
Definitely. And I like that I'm coming at this from both a female, human, and engineering perspective. I would start off by saying, don't let the current underdevelopment of an industry deter you from joining it. As was mentioned before, you can be the change that you want to see. And I had this conversation with someone only recently, and the question was positioned to me, why is it that so many young women, young girls are flocking towards architecture? And truthfully, I couldn't speak for the majority of them, but the numbers are showing that they are coming towards engineering, not just architecture. And so it started this perspective shift from the question that's generally positioned, why aren't women more interested in this, to why isn't their interest being cultivated? And I speak from the position of going back in time to when I was a high school student. I was on the journey to be going into law my entire life. And for some reason that I cannot even fathom right now, I decided in fourth form to switch to the technical stream. And teachers, they supported me because I was quality student. I was continuing to do my work and so on. But a specific male within the teaching field and continued to discourage me, to deter me, and to question, I don't understand why you're in this field. You should have gone into law. You should go into law. Not necessarily to poison the idea that I had of it, but because he generally believed that I, as a woman, and the voice that I had should be in law. And so I consider that perspective of young girls who are, let's say, in high school. They're trying to determine which stream should I go into. That's an important decision that they need to be making. And it really starts, or the educators within our society have a lot to do with that, especially if we're talking about the younger generation and how we can position our questions, how we can position our views towards answering them, not necessarily to push back against them joining it, but to cultivate that idea, find out why they want to do it, show them opportunities. And they can dip their toes in, decide they don't want to do it, but they have a degree to show for it at the end of it all. Within the University of Guyana, I have seen growth in the amount of women that we have in our classrooms. And so I would commend the academic development that's happening, but still you find that there are offhand comments, there are offhand questions, or even perceptions from persons, males within the class. And so because of the growth that's happening within the industry, especially the engineering industry, I'd say don't be afraid to jump into it, whether engineering or otherwise. Don't be discouraged by the underdevelopment of that. Step into it. Be the change you want to see by becoming this new person with a new perspective, with a new idea, who's going to add up the numbers, influence others, and build up the statistic to say that, yes, from 5 women to 10 women, from 10 women to 50 women, from 50 women to 1,000 women, they are causing impact and they're continuing to influence others behind them. So join with that.
Thank you, Aruni. So, this actually is the end of our panel discussion, but I want to end it out on what Aruni would have said. So I want to reiterate, especially to the women around the room, the young women who may have things that they want to get into, but they're a bit hesitant. So as Aruni would have said, don't be afraid and be the change that you want to see. I'll now open the discussion to our audience. If you have any questions you want to ask, please feel free. Did I cover everything? Okay. Does our panel want to answer any of the questions that I would have asked? Maybe you had something that you wanted to add to it?
I was hoping maybe we would have come back to some other questions. One of the things I keep observing, the male-dominated space. There's a saying that the gospel would remain in the pews because the members of the church need the gospel more than the people outside need the gospel. Male-dominated space, as I mentioned, women have to redefine that space. I see women would sit in position for 4 years, for 5 years, even 3 years. And all they have been doing in that space is trying to figure out how they should lead and what their leadership should look like. When they leave that space now, quickly that space is observed back by the males who are waiting for it. As a woman, if we are getting into non-traditional spaces and we want women to continue taking up those spaces, we must find a way to ensure that it's succession planning and it looks like women. I keep hearing this conversation that women say, if you look at all the boards, most of the boards in Guyana especially, 1/3 of them are for women. Why can't we have more? But you as a woman in leadership, what have you done with your space? President of GCCI, my last term, I'm out after this. What have I done with the space? Close to 40% now of my board are females. When I got there, it was way below 30%. I intentionally put strong women, and keyword, strong women, because I've realized now a lot of women like to be in the space because what the space would bring to them, right? The publicity, the beauty, the travel, the Facebook images, and so on. So I put strong women in that space. I also ensure that even in the executive, I set it up in a way that a female, maybe in another 2, 3 years, 4 years, can be the president of the GCCI, because I would have failed women if this one woman or first woman thing rests on Kathy Smith's shoulder and she gone into the dust and there's no other female to do that. So if we are talking about male, if we are talking about male-dominated space and we want that space to look mutual, that you can't even recognize who's male or female in that space, as a woman in leadership, you ought to understand that you being put there has nothing to do with you trying to experience what you did not know. It's about you rising to the occasion and ensuring that the young lady, the little girl that come behind you, that she know that this space belongs to her. For example, I'm listening to this young lady, and I feel so privileged to listen to her talk her story. And I now see why I'm creating spaces for women to walk in, because I want her to walk into spaces that nobody created for me, that I had to create for myself, right? So as the audience were thinking about the questions, I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Kathy. I feel inspired.
Hi. And I just have another point to add to that, because I have the privilege of being in the company or current, and even while I was in the audience, of listening to women in business, to women with years of experience. And even as the previous, I believe it was the previous panelist would have mentioned, someone had spoken to her earlier about having an older mentor and her now being able to mentor others younger than her. And I thought to myself, my, what the world would look like if we all did that. So I think also adding to the conversations, mentorship, role models are extremely important. You find that if a young child has a parent who exhibits awesome qualities, they'll look up to them, they'll want to be like them, they'll be around them, they'll want to be around them, so that the influence of habits and mindset happens. And I think that even in these industries, whether in business or in any of the fields that we're talking about today, if you could identify at least one person, and it helps if it's a female as well, considering that we're trying to get more females involved in this. If you can find at least one person and start showing them the ropes, showing them and teaching them. I remember speaking with a person at a point in time, and we had the conversation, and I asked him, what do you do? He said to me, I train my replacements. And I asked him, what does that mean? And so he revolved in multiple spaces, but what his job role is, he trains his replacements. Now what that looks like is he goes into these different industries as the professional, and he trains people how to do it to the best standard, to the best quality. He trains the person who's going to step in after him, so he ensures that the standard of work that is operating within that company from then on is above par and above average. And so if we would all get into the mindset of understanding, yes, we have this position, but we won't be here for forever, and start training our replacements to empower the next generation and move from just empowerment to activation, then we would see an influence and see a change like never before. And it really just has to start with one person.
And I think while we're waiting on questions, just one more point as well. I think in understanding what visibility is, oftentimes people think visibility is just being on Facebook, being in a newspaper, being seen by someone. But we all need to understand as women, sometimes charting various courses in different directions, like in architecture, in business, and so on. Sometimes we have to create that path to enable others to see the possibilities as well. So when we hear an announcement, we can also see ourselves in that position. So while the institutional framework is being presented or created, we also can believe that we belong there, as Shanti said. There's purpose, and you have that ability to achieve as well. But in talking about visibility, what I was thinking about is beyond just being in a newspaper. Looking at ourselves as women, beyond just being the first, but looking at how we can create impact. And that starts with us. That starts with knowing who you are and what contribution you will make. At the end of Kathy's role, for instance, what would she like to achieve? What is it that she would like to have as her defining legacy, if you like? You know, what is it that we as women would like to achieve? What is our purpose? What difference would we like to make in a particular role? And I think from that angle, once you would have defined yourself, you can then say, listen, I bring X strength. These are my strengths. This is who I am. And this is how I'll present myself in this position. And inevitably, you will make a difference because you're working on your strengths. And that's how I believe women should move, with intention and purpose. So ultimately, the visibility sometimes is created by itself because people will report on your success as opposed to you trying to force visibility through pictures, you know, different tools, Facebook and other media, to create something that oftentimes you're not. Because you see a lot of positions and you ask, what are we achieving in this position? But we're seeing a lot of photos, we're seeing a lot of images, we're seeing a lot of videos, but it's all created to create that effect as opposed to meaningfully creating spaces where young people like yourself can see themselves in that position and where spaces like the institutional framework can be created for them to actually achieve the goal that you want to achieve. So I really do believe that we have to reimagine visibility, how we see it, and then reimagine influence as well. What do we hope to achieve and what we're doing proactively to create the spaces so that not only we can achieve, but others can as well.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for contributing to the conversation. And this was bringing us to the end of our presentation.
But
okay, we have one question.
Just before you go, we have one question here from...
Thank you. I was reading someone's post the other day, Janelle Prasad, and she was talking about sometimes she gets worked up about issues and she is worried and she's concerned and so about it. And then she reflects on what a privilege it is to have the time to think about those things and to want to make the world better. And a lot of us here have that opportunity. But there are women in Guyana and women elsewhere who do not even have that privilege to sit and think about how can I make myself better? How can I make the world better? I was reading something about India. Women were getting hysterectomies because they were not given time off from their job. And if they missed a day of work, they had to pay their employer for that missed day of work. And so we're still living in a society that has those severe cases of gender imbalance. And you can see how it affects women if you have to go to that extent to remove your uterus so that you can continue working and feeding your family and so forth. We may have more local cases of women with not as severe situations, but nevertheless a situation that can also affect them and their well-being. And so my thought here right now is, how do we make a world, and this is not an easy question, how do we make the world such a place that women are no longer surviving, but they're thriving? And there's so much work left to be done, and I just want all of us to keep that at the back of our heads. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarias. Any last words?
Listening to you bring your thoughts out for that question, I hope that that question did not put you in a space where it made you pull back on something that you wanted to do. Because, let's say, for example, what's her name? Your name? Huh? Aruni. You know, something I would say to Aruni, because there's a lot of things happening in this world that we can't change, we can't do anything about it. But what we can do is to throw that one stone in the river to get our ripple effect, and then the other stone come. I often say to young people, when adult women are giving you advice, one of the things you want to do is to listen to their fear and their pain inside of it, and don't accept it. Hear me here. Women were given a bad hand at life, and a lot of them are going through a lot of fear and a lot of pain, and sometimes they project that on the world and on young people and make those young people with a bright and ambitious mind pull themselves in back. And a lot of women are fearful of asking for help, but they keep that pain on them and carry that pain. Some of the pain you can see physically. So that is why they will walk into a room, highly intelligent, competent, technically competent, very certified and qualified more than a man. But you know what comes out every day at that boardroom? Their fear, their pain. So we can't change the world. There's so much things happening in the world. And you know something I've also noticed? A lot of women are going out and bring the world's problem into Guyana. Sometimes we got to figure out how we're going to fix this 853,000 people, and let's move on. And then your cup, run it over. Fill your cup. Then when the cup run it over, then you go out to the world and bring. So many a times I will see so much conversation on social media, because we have become so much experts these days on social media. We have all become psychologists and all of these things. But you have to be careful and listen when the fear is coming out against when the encouragement and the motivation is coming out. And this young lady said something. She said mentors. I want to show another word here. Listen, y'all don't invite me to these things and give me this short time, right? Because I can go on and on, right? But I know people got to go. I got to go too. She mentioned mentor. But something I'm noticing happening in the private sector is something called sponsor. You see Selwyn there? That's a sponsor for women. A sponsor is somebody who call our name in places that we can't go in, that we might not be able to get in. But then the people in the room reach out to us. How come? A sponsor. So this man has been going around sponsoring women. He have been calling their name. He have been celebrating them in spaces that they had no idea that they need to be in space. So women and men, we are fighting our battles. There's a lot of things that we need to change. But let me tell you something, that one stone. Start with that one stone and throw it in the water and get your ripple effect. And you're going to see everybody else is going to come with a ripple effect. All right? Just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so very much.
Can I add to Kathy on a different note here? Coming back to you, where do we start? I do want to put this out there. I've seen so many women who's also attacking women. And someone just reached out yesterday to me, don't know me, I've not met this person. Someone told them that, oh, you should talk to me. And they called, and she started one crying, and just like that, this other woman, what is she doing to pull her down right now? And she was even contemplating last week to commit suicide. And so, you know, we might think about the men here and fighting a battle here to stand out. But I do want to say that even as women, how are we supporting each other to stand and to be strong? And so just to put that out there too, is that not only the men, as Selwyn is helping us, why are we not helping each other too? So just a point to note.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Point to note. Thank you very much, members of panel number 2. It's been wonderful listening to all of you, visionary, trailblazing women, as you articulated your thoughts and experience on the topic that you were discussing. Thank you so very much to all of you. As we bring this evening to a close, I would like to now invite Dr. Lisa Edwards from the Institute of Gender Studies here at the University of Guyana to give some closing remarks. Thank you, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ferguson, for that introduction. I'll promise I'll keep this very brief. I really want to extend thank you to Mr. Collins and Brand Youth Global for approaching the Vice Chancellor to have this event done in collaboration with us. Spaces like this, forum like this, is not only about women sharing their experiences, their lived realities, and so on, because it's not just limited to the individual, but community as well. But some of these challenges that we would have heard today is also very much systematic. So to be able to connect a forum like this to the academy is also to strengthen the work that needs to be done and to build bridges across spaces in how we are seeing the academy and the impact of doing this work on our individual lives and so on. So I just want to say a very heartfelt thank you to all of the panelists who would have participated in this event. The stories you would have shared certainly resonates, and there's a long, long history, but I know this is not a gender class, so I'm not going to get into all of that nuances, but it's very much connected, so much in our system that we could spend quite some time unpacking and deconstructing what our panelists would have shared. Also, to take this opportunity really to thank UG and the other units we would have worked with, like DEC, like FMD, to really putting this together, because doing this work, you know, it involves so many persons, but also very quickly, because I don't want to miss this point. A few weeks ago, I was in a meeting, and a male colleague was sharing that when he attends some of these events, it's always about a set of women. I had some time to reflect on it, and what I found is that was an unfortunate comment, because instead of focusing on who the participants are, he should have really focused in on the meat of that presentation at that time. And so listening to these women today, it is also an opportunity for our men and our boys really to reevaluate their positioning to us. These are not individual stories. They're very much systematic, and they are not at the exclusion of men and boys. They do have an active role to play if we are very much serious in changing some of these negative narratives, these toxic systems within our society. And I just really want to share that. So even though this is a women's forum, men and boys are important and they need to show up, but we can't drag them. We can help to usher them, but they also have to take accountability for their own actions as well, yeah? So many thanks again, Vice Chancellor, for the connection. Mr. Collins from Brand Youth and our continuing engagement, our DEC team, FMD, really and truly, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. Before you go, I would like to invite all the panelists. We would like to have a group photo with the Vice Chancellor. So thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you so much for everyone that made the time. Thank you to our online audience. We thank you for staying with us. And before we go, the answers that I wrote down concerning what do we keep the energy, we keep the commitment, we keep celebrating the gains that we have made, the firsts. We keep celebrating those. What must we break? We break the cycles, the systems that don't serve us. We break the mindsets that don't serve us. That's what I have here. And then what do we become? We become mentors, allies, and sponsors. Thank you, men, for being here with us. We become strategic. We become unafraid. and we become impactful. Thank you so very much for being with us this evening.